Great. Good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited to have you join our second Friday Forum today. This is one of the many that CARA is sponsoring on key issues and campaigns over the next few months. We hope you find these events informative, engaging, and fun, and inspirational as that video was very inspirational. It just brought tears to my eyes. But today's event will be focusing on an issue that is newish for CARA, climate justice. Although CARA has supported legislation on the state level that addresses issues like electric vehicles, setting goals to decrease dependence on fossil fuels, and anti-fracking legislation, etc., we have been on the outskirts of these efforts. After past summer's wildfires, high heat incidents, roving power outages, bad air, many of our members voted at our senior vote forums to move this issue higher up on our priority list. Today's event is the first step to set the table on the issue of climate justice and why it is so important for seniors and people with disabilities to learn about the threats to our communities at the local, state, and national levels, and to begin to engage our members in efforts to address the environmental pandemic facing all of us. We have a great program for you today, and I have a few logistics to go over, and then we will get started. Everyone will be muted except for the speakers. We will open the lines for questions throughout this hour program. You have to raise your hand to be called on. We will instruct you on how to do that when we get to that part of the agenda. For those of you who are on Zoom and would like captioning, you can enable the captioning button on your Zoom device and the words will accompany the speakers. We also encourage you to ask questions in the chat if you are on Zoom. Our CARA staff and our guest speakers will try to answer your questions there. We are recording this forum, so it will be available to you and others in your organizations to view and to learn from. So without further ado, here we go. Our first speakers are going to help set the stage for today's event by sharing why climate justice is so important to the aging and disability communities. Our first speaker is Dr. Marty Lynch. He is a PhD and is the Chief Executive Officer Emeritus. He has been the Director of Lifelong Medicare and the Over 60 Health Center since 1982 and a nonprofit administrator for more than 30 years. Dr. Lynch has co-founded the Elderly Subcommittee of the National Association of Community Health Centers and is the past chair of the California Primary Care Association. He recently served on the state task force to examine policy changes necessary for the integration of primary care and mental health services and worked to develop a California plan for Alzheimer's disease. He also served as a member of the Master Plan on Aging Stakeholder Advisory Committee and brought climate justice issues to the forefront within the Master Plan. I give you Dr. Lynch.
Thank you, Dee. Much appreciated. And boy, that was a pretty amazing poem performance earlier. Do you want me to share my screen to use the slides I was going to use? Can you allow that?
Yes, please. I believe you can.
Okay, let's try that. Let's try that and see if I can figure it out on my end. If I can't, I apologize, but I think we'll get it going here in a second. I got to get rid of all these various windows to get to the slideshow. Thank you. I think I'm gonna leave it in this format just because oh, there we go. Well, I keep getting the messages from Zoom. Let me find the slideshow here and do it that way because that helps me. Okay, good. Thanks. Okay, so great to be here. And this is an amazing issue. But the part that I've started to work on really is the interaction with health. And there's many public health experts who actually say that climate change is the next big pandemic, maybe the largest pandemic we're going to change or going to face in our near future. So this is a National Health Institute video, or not video, but just a graphic that helps think about it some. I'm going to fill in 3 different layers here. The first one is simply some of the actual weather changes, sea level rise, temperature rise, those sorts of very immediate impacts, which then have a secondary impact that create air pollution, vectors, water quality issues, etc., extreme heat issues, severe weather issues that are much in our mind right now. And then if you think about it, you can add a third layer where those issues actually then lead to different actual health conditions, whether it be heat-related illness or asthma or pollution-related things, malnutrition, a variety of issues, essentially. But it's a nice way to think about going from the very physical changes all the way up to what affects our health and is affecting our health even more today and in our population, including cardiovascular and pulmonary issues. Now, let's keep going. So some of the biggest ones that we focused on in the master plan discussion about climate change are big in California. So extreme heat, and you can think about the impact on people that are working outdoors in the valley, Southern California. You can think about low-income populations who can't afford air conditioning, that sort of thing, and the effect that extreme heat will have on people. Very much in the forefront of our thinking these days in California is this air quality issue, and the fact that the air quality causes significant cardiovascular problems and other health problems. And of course, we learned, because it's times of COVID, we learned that people that have exposure to significant air quality and air pollution issues have worse COVID outcomes. Probably not a surprise, but a little scary if you happen to live in one of those impacted communities. We mentioned the earlier presentation mentioned issues like power outages and such related to climate issues. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing that in Texas right now. And I don't know if Christina is going to speak or not, but the issue of disabled people and older people with disabilities who rely on electricity-powered life support systems is a really important one as we plan for disasters. And then maybe one of the things we don't think about too much is there's probably a nutrition advantage to doing some things that are also climate friendly. I have a doctor friend in Florida who works on climate change, who said works in low-income community. She says the biggest thing that most people can do is eat one less meal of red meat a week because of the climate impact of growing beef, basically. And you get both better health outcomes and you have a good impact on the climate. And if you can't afford to have solar panels or an electric car, you can certainly afford to do that. So, and then of course, you know, it's worth mentioning that nature has a very healing effect on many of us, and our ability to get out in it and to have natural settings available to us is important. Okay, I'm going to zip through the rest of this because it's really just to open a discussion for you about the importance of health related to climate. So a little more on the wildfire aspect, because as I said, it's so present in California. Some of the major pollutants and some of the effects, secondary effects, basically, when you think about respiratory problems that lead to emergency department visits, hospitalizations, COPD, that sort of thing. I have asthma myself, and I know I stick to the indoors when that smoke comes in for a month or two at a time in our area. Now we're starting to see perhaps not an elder issue, but an issue for our kids and grandkids, the adverse impacts on pregnancy and preterm delivery of exposure to pollution as well. So lots of very immediate impacts on us from wildfire smoke and pollution. Let's go to the next slide. I'm not going to go over all this, but I wanted to make it available to you in case you wanted to look later. It basically talks about different things that we can do. And, we know that the face masks, the N95s are really good on the pollution and the smoke side, but that even cloth face masks also have a positive impact and cut some percentage of smoke pollution down. The other thing I'll mention here is simply has a health or public health intervention. We haven't really gotten to the point, but we may get to the point where buying a patient or a consumer a HEPA air filter to use during these smoke events becomes one of the best things that a public health or a medical institution can do to avoid some of these other problems. And let's just say, before we leave this, let's just say that it's definitely clear that there's more impact on brown and Black communities because of people's economic situation, where people live, what kind of jobs they have. So it's one of these areas where we know that there's an equity issue as well, just like we're seeing with vaccine distribution now. There's an equity issue in terms of the health impacts of climate change. And we've seen data already that says that redlined poorer neighborhoods are closer to pollution, they're hotter, COVID outcomes are worse, more pollution basically. So all important issues. Also sitting on the side, on the equity side, is this immigration impact that we know climate change in other countries is indeed having an immigration impact on us as well. So I think that my finals, and then I assume you're going to go into this more, but I always like to include it, is simply it's important that we educate ourselves about the health impact of climate change, but then that we link our advocacy to that as well. We called out in the master plan specifically walkable neighborhoods, housing, transportation issues. We didn't call out the health issues so much on climate change. It's a chance to think about how all of our organizations' advocacy work can link to the governor's efforts, our own green strategies, local zoning decisions to create more dense housing, more transit-friendly housing. We have opportunities to do advocacy while we deal with these health impacts that may hit each of us individually and we need help with from the health systems as well. So I'm going to stop there and turn it back over to Dee or Jody, who's ever taken it from there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
You need to unshare your screen.
Okay, I'm going to try to do that as soon as I can here. Yes, pause share, stop share. Okay.
There.
Got it? You got it back?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Great. Our next speaker was going to be Christina Mills, but she had a family emergency. So we wish her well. Jody Reed, our great director for CARA, is going to fill some space.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I wasn't planning on doing this, but as Dee said, Christina had a family emergency. And so I just want to add one thing to what Marty just said that I know Christina was going to focus on. She's the executive director of the California Foundation for Independent Living Centers, was also a member of the Stakeholder Advisory Committee for the Master Plan on Aging, and has been in the forefront on advocating around the impacts of climate change on people with disabilities. And the one thing I know she wanted to talk about today that I'm going to share, not as well as she would have, but that we want to include in what we focus on, is in particular the need for all of us to think about this changing climate and the impact it has, and take responsibility ourselves to have a plan for evacuations in the case of high heat or fire or sea level rise, or roving power outages, which have become more frequent because of this changing and environment that we're living in. And so we all can do our share by having a go bag ready, and also a plan on if we need help evacuating when one of these incidents occurs, to think about who can help us, whether it's a neighbor or a friend or a family member, particularly if we have accessibility needs that are going to require us to be in a lift van or a place where we can fold up our wheelchair, and or if we need help getting into a vehicle or into a safe, cool environment, that we all have to have a plan. That's first of all, and not depend on anybody else to make a plan. But then there's a lot of advocacy that we can do with our utility companies and our public utility commissions and others, to really make sure that they're keeping in mind when we have that when they roll out these power outages, that there is sensitivity to the need to properly inform people if they're planned power outages to, reserve and protect our energy resources, that people are made aware of it, and with enough notice so that they can then implement your own emergency plan. That hasn't happened so well across the state, and certain, PG&E is trying to step up on this, but there's a long way to go. And then there's Southern California Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric, and all of these folks need to really be thinking that, many people depend on energy to be able to get use the equipment that they have, the services that they need, the elevator that they might require to get up and down in their building. And they need time to think about how they're going to adjust if there's going to be a planned outage, let alone when there's an emergency evacuation. So those are some additional efforts that we all need to be aware of and plan for. And we're hoping at CARA to do some more training around emergency preparedness as it relates to climate change, so that people have a personal plan while we advocate for changes to make our planet and our state and our communities less dependent on energy and focus more on renewable solutions. So that's my part of Christina's presentation, and back to you, Dee.
Dee, you're muted.
Thank you. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Jody. And again, we wish Christina Mills well with her family emergency. Our next up is, to wrap up this section of our agenda, we want to share a short video with you by George, the poet from England, who sums up the importance of each of us engaging in the fight for a sustainable planet.
A paradigm shift is a change in common sense. But how do you go about rearranging common sense? Especially with years of research and journalism making the conversation long and dense. Well, sense isn't something to try and enforce. It should be kind of endorsed by a reliable source. And in the case of climate change, a good place to start would be science, of course. Now, you remember science from school, an essential subject. Well, let's consider it standing in the general public. Our scientists are in a position to advise us on some of our biggest decisions. And it's probably in our interest to listen, but also to invite others to witness the vision. The first way to do that is to be the vision. Through your lifestyle choices, you can lead the mission. Bring the future to your present when it seems a bit distant. The cleanest existence is green and efficient. And you haven't really played your part until your lifestyle reflects a change of heart. It's a continuous process. I'm still working on it myself, but technology plays a major part. I'm trying to play my part as an artist, but all I do is write verses and harmonize melodies. Now, The point of us working together on this is that one of you knows how to decarbonize energy. So if you could consider that when making your plans, I'm happy to leave it in your capable hands. This is the solution government can't offer: ground level collaboration. Doesn't it sound better than having patience? Instead of sleepwalking into the governance trap, using our imagination to take initiative as a nation, which involves looking at our economic ambitions to ensure that, as well as earning ourselves more and banking ourselves more, we're actually doing things we're thanking ourselves for in the long run. Because a lucrative plan is a smart one, but a sustainable plan is a strong one.
Very interesting.
Okay, Dee.
That's great. We are now proud to introduce a panel of presenters to share examples of ways in which CARA can engage in climate justice efforts at the local, national, and state levels. There are so many organizations working on key environmental issues, and there are many legislative efforts as well. We are not suggesting that these are the only efforts to engage in, but rather to give you a taste of what is happening and how we can get involved through our CARA action teams, through our state legislative work, and through our national advocacy efforts. Each of these speakers will have 5 minutes to present, and once they have all presented, we will have time for some questions and answers. First up is Paul Wermer from the San Francisco Climate Coalition, who will give us an example of local actions that CARA could participate in. Paul Wermer was at Intel, managing materials development programs with suppliers, when he became interested in what sustainable means. A more complex question then is this toxic? Or what is a carbon footprint? Recognizing the significant global impacts of the built environment, he started Paul Wermer Sustainability Consulting, focusing on green building and land use. Paul is with us today, representing the San Francisco Climate Coalition.
Hello, and let me see if I can get this screen shared. Yes, okay. And so I'm talking about climate change at the local level. And there was a phrase that came to mind as I was bringing this up, that old song with including the line, and the knee bone connected to the thigh bone. And the reason that's significant is we are in the midst of a complex web, a system that interacts in many, many different ways. And we need to keep that in mind. So let's, come on. Why is this not moving? Okay, hold on a minute. Do we have there we go. Okay, so it's not just climate change is the first point. What happens is in the production of the greenhouse gases that's most dominant, namely carbon dioxide, we're producing carbon-based fuels. That's a polluting process. We're then burning them. That creates more pollutants. Methane, soot, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide are all greenhouse gases. And along with hydrogen sulfide, polluted water, particulate matter, and volatile organic carbons, they're health issues. They're environmental issues. And as was touched on earlier, health is a big impact, not just from climate change itself, but from the fuels we're using that are causing climate change. Significant impact on child development is now becoming very, very clear. Both lung function and mental function, but heart, lung, and mental function at all ages is affected by these pollutants. There's the ecosystem damage, and then there's the climate change impact and all of the things that that does. So lots of things all connected. I want to jump in and say that behind all of this is a very strong recognition that the climate issue is very much a justice issue, a social justice, an environmental justice issue. It affects job transitions, just transitions. And I don't want to dwell on that too much, but please understand, this is underlying a lot of the asks and needs that we go through. So how can we address it? What can we do? Well, we can start by looking at US greenhouse gas emissions, and we see commercial and residential buildings and transportation are about 40%, and agriculture is about 10%. The question is, how can we effectively influence this on a local basis? And if one looks at a local basis, and this is San Francisco's footprint in 2018, we see that transportation, the dark blue, and buildings, the turquoise, are at about almost 90% of the footprint. So those are areas that we really can influence quite well by working at the local level. Why local? Well, that's where your knowledge is greatest. You understand the local conditions. You know the politicians in principle. You certainly vote for them. You've got neighbors you can recruit. So your power is greatest at the local level. That's also where things happen. Building codes and regulations, maintenance, financing of streets, parks, transit, housing, school, and on is local. The money may come from the state or the federal, but how it's spent and how these are implemented are very much at the local level. And finally, local officials influence state and federal officials, both at an agency level and at a legislative level. And your state and federal officials might not be that willing to listen to you, but if they are hearing from you and from the local officials, they're that much more likely to act. And examples where local action has been very significant is on building electrification. So there's been a lot of news about the new construction gas bans, the requirements that new buildings be all electric. There are like 40 jurisdictions in California now that have done that. But we also need to do retrofits because that's the only way we deal with the emissions from the existing buildings. And as part of that, we need to consider extreme weather. Now, as a coastal California resident, the thought of air conditioning being needed is new, but it's clearly coming. The nice thing is we've got that capability with the heat pumps, that it's one system that provides the service. Transit and transportation, big impact on air quality and greenhouse gas emissions. Locally, in EV infrastructure, charging stations are significant. Getting the transit services electrified is a big deal. And as was talked earlier, resilience, energy supply and shelters. How do we deal with things like the public safety power shutoffs or the Texas debacle? Again, those are local issues with microgrids and local solutions, both for shelters or for district energy approaches that can be very powerful. I started out through the Climate Reality Project, and I met with my supervisor, and I got polite listening. I then joined up with the San Francisco Climate Emergency Coalition, and when I joined with them and with constituents to meet with the supervisors, I actually got attention and action. And this should be no surprise to those of you who come out of a union background, that it's collaboration that makes progress. And the good news is, on the climate front, there are all sorts of groups out there to collaborate with, to help amplify your voice, and to bring in specific skills where you don't have them. So for example, the redwood energy, which is, and I don't know if this shows up on your screen or not, where my mouse is, whoops.
Hi, Paul. Just letting you know that we're running low on time.
Okay, so at any rate, collaboration is a big deal, and that outreach to other groups is significant, and I'll be happy to provide more contact to those who are interested. And with that, I will stop screen sharing. I guess I did stop screen sharing. Never mind.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, you're welcome.
Next is Bob Yunke, representing Elders Climate Action, sharing a national campaign with a state angle. Bob Yunke lives in Oregon and is an environmental attorney. He is also a leader of the Elders Climate Action, which is an organization of elders, including grandparents, great aunts, great uncles, who care about the future for all children. The mission of Elders Climate Action is to mobilize elders throughout the United States to address climate change while there is still time to protect the well-being of our grandchildren and the future generations. They are dedicated to using the power of caring, wisdom, and numbers to push for strong policies that will reduce greenhouse gases in our atmosphere to a level consistent with life thriving on our planet. Mr. Yunke, or Yunke, sorry.
I appreciate the invitation to be part of your program here, and welcome the opportunity to share what we're doing at ECA, Elders Climate Action. Your members. Was there a problem? No? Okay. What we're focused on, of course, is the science of the climate movement, which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has told us that what we must do is get to zero greenhouse gas emissions in order to stabilize the climate. In other words, the climate is going to keep warming until we stop adding more greenhouse gas pollutants into the atmosphere. And the hope is that we can accomplish that before we warm the planet more than 1.5 degrees centigrade above the pre-industrial background level. We're now at 1.2 degrees centigrade above that level. So we have very little time left to try to avoid crossing the 1.5 threshold. And we can see that the impacts of climate change are already with us. We saw 5 million acres burn in California this summer. Up in Oregon, we had 1.2 million acres. And across the West in the United States, the 11 Western states, over 10 million acres burned last year. Yes.
Do you have two devices on by any chance?
No,
Oh, because we're getting an echo.
I don't have any other devices on.
Okay, keep going. We can hear you. Oops, we can hear you. There's just a little echo.
Okay. So in Australia last summer, they experienced 30 million acres burned. In all these situations, the acreages burned are double what they were 5 years ago. And the science is telling us that it's going to double again in the next 5 years and double again in the next 5 years after that. So we're facing a major challenge in the West, particularly with fires. And we know what the answer is. We have to stop burning carbon. And when we stop burning carbon, we also stop creating all the other air pollutants that Dr. Lynch was explaining to you and that Paul was talking about. 95% of all pollutants in the atmosphere come from the product of burning carbon. So if we stop burning petroleum fuel in our cars, we will stop making urban smog. We will clean up Los Angeles. If you lived in Los Angeles in April during the lockdown, when no one was driving, you saw some of the cleanest air that Los Angeles has ever experienced since the beginning of the 19th century. That is the future that we can create for ourselves. Clean cities, safe air quality to bring up our kids in if we stop burning carbon. So it's not just climate change that is the reason for doing this. So at ECA, what we do for our members is develop both national campaigns, and we have chapters in 17 states that are working on state level campaigns. In California, we're doing both. There are 2 chapters for ECA, one in Northern California, one in Southern California. We have a team that tracks legislation in the California legislature, and we're also working with the congressional delegation from California on trying to build support for national legislation. So we're doing both. And at the same time, we're trying to keep our members informed of what the science is telling us about what must be done. Because the science told us that these fires would happen. That the science predicting the fires that we saw last summer was published 5 years ago. But that was not turned into action. It was not turned into legislation that would help stop what is going on with climate impacts. And that's the problem of translating the science through public awareness into political action by the decision makers who have the power to bring about the changes that we need. So that's where we need to work together. We need to collaborate, as Paul was saying, with each other. And we at Elders Climate Action would love to provide support for activism on the part of CARA members, particularly in California. Our legislative team would be happy to share their evaluation of bills that are being submitted into the legislature, and with the national campaign that we're running right now, which is focused on convincing Congress that we need to set a deadline for when the automakers must make zero emission vehicles. Right now, electric vehicle sales in the United States are less than 2% of total sales. We're not making a lot of progress. We're falling behind China and Europe in that regard. So we need Congress to take action to say to the automakers, and our proposal is that by 2030, no new fossil fuel engines can be sold in the United States. They must all be zero emission technologies. And that is what we need to solve the climate crisis, and it's what we need to clean up our cities from air pollution. And so we would welcome some of your members to join our legislative review team, and we would share our analysis of bills in the legislature with you and include your members in the alerts that we send out periodically to our members, asking them to engage members of the legislature or in Congress, both. So if you have folks who are concerned about what's going on with the fires and want to engage with us in becoming effective climate advocates, we would welcome you to join our legislative evaluation team or the circle of activists from our membership who are actively engaged with their members of Congress and their members of the legislature.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay, Dee.
Great. Now, thank you, Bob. Our next, our final panelist for this portion of the agenda is Assemblymember Rob Bonta, who represents the 18th Assembly District in Oakland, California. Many of us know Assemblymember Bonta. He is a true champion of many of the issues that CARA supports and prioritizes. What you might not know is that Assemblymember Bonta introduced the California Green New Deal legislation in last session and was named the environmental champion of the California legislature in 2020. Assemblyman Bonta's passion for opportunity and equality was instilled in him at a very young age by his parents, who taught him to understand injustice and the importance of joining the struggle to empower vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. He was the first Filipino American elected to the California state legislature and growing up in a trailer a stone's throw away from Cesar Chavez's home, Bonta watched closely as his parents worked for United Farm Workers of America and organized Filipino and Mexican American farm workers, infusing his formative years with firsthand experience of one of the greatest peaceful social, racial, and economic justice movements of all time. He's going to share some of the opportunities to create a climate justice agenda in California. I give you Assemblymember Rob Bonta.
Thank you, Dee, for the very kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Honored to be with you today. And so is my dog, Legolas, who you can hear in the background, chiming in from time to time. He's passionate about addressing climate change at the speed, scope, and scale that we need to. So you might hear from him. And I just wanted to say I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thankful to be able to talk about engagement for all of our communities, our international community, our California community, our national community, and certainly our seniors and those with disabilities to address the existential threat of our time, which is climate change. And I think we really need to understand it as that to provide the urgency and acceleration of the response that's needed. And we are California. So if anyone is a steward of our environment, a leader nationally and internationally, it's California. So we need to be stepping up and leaning in and leading the charge. And so, the threat of climate change is unlimited. And so our response needs to match that threat with the scope, speed, and scale, the ambition, the urgency that we need to protect our one planet and save it. And one of the things that really motivates me, I know it motivates a lot of you, is when we see our young people who really should be able to be doing their studies and meeting their full potential and realizing their dreams, but they don't feel that they will necessarily have a planet to live on, or that their kids will. And I have a daughter who's 21 years old, and she told me, Dad, I was talking to my friends and I would love to have our family. I love our family. I want to have kids, but I don't think I will, because I don't want to bring them onto a dying planet. I don't think that's fair to them. And that really sort of captures, in my view, the tragedy of where we are and the need to change. The good news is, even with the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's studies, we can move the needle. There is still time, but we need to step up and lean in and respond aggressively and in a unified way. A lot of what the Biden administration has done on day one with executive orders, like joining the Paris agreements and joining the world community in accepting the truth and the facts of climate change and committing to working together to address it, very important. But there's a lot more we need to do, and reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as an international community by half by 2030 is step one, and then being carbon neutral by 2050 is what the UN panel has told us we need to do. So you can back that out and start identifying steps that we need to start taking today in order to get to that goal, to avoid the catastrophic consequences of climate change that we know is coming, that the scientists are telling us is coming, that the scientific community and Mother Nature have been screaming at us to do more, to step up, to act faster, to act more boldly. We see it now in Texas. We see it with our wildfires. As the governor of California has said, the hots are hotter, the dries are drier, the wets are wetter. We are experiencing climate change in real time. If you don't want to believe the international community of scientists, just believe your own eyes. The anecdotal evidence is telling you climate change is real. And so recognizing that is step one, recognizing its true scope, scale, that its threat is very important. And then the response, Dee talked about the California Green New Deal. It's different than the National Green New Deal. Similar in foundation and principle, commitment to two things: addressing climate change with the urgency that's needed, and also with baking in equity in every part of the solution, making sure that those who have suffered most from a fossil fuel economy are first in line to benefit from a green society and a clean energy economy. That is the same, but California is unique in a good way in terms of what it's done to address climate change over the years. So some of the things that are in the federal proposal for the Green New Deal are different than California because we've done many of those things already. We have AB 32, we have SB 32, we have targets for greenhouse gas reductions, we have SB 100. We have many other steps that we've taken. We have a governor's executive order to not have any manufacturing of vehicles with combustion engines after 2035 for vehicles, and then for heavier duty commercial vehicles 2045. So we've taken some of the most aggressive steps in the nation, and we still need to do more, because if California can't meet the requirements of the UN panel, that who's going to do it? And we need to show the way, show that it's possible, and make sure that we are inspiring folks along the way. And so, one of the things we always get is how are you going to pay for it? It is expensive. It is expensive to move from a fossil fuel economy. Well, let me put that in the context. It's expensive at the beginning to make the pivot. The change at the beginning costs money. You need really significant investments in clean energy, in wind, in solar, et cetera, and the infrastructure for EVs throughout the state of California. But over time, obviously, it will save money, and it will save the planet, and it will save lives, and it will address climate change. So it is the ROI that we need to look at, the long-term cost benefit analysis, but that doesn't necessarily solve the problem for how you pay for it on day one. And my short answer to how you're going to pay for it is how can we afford not to? We have one planet. We have one planet to live on. I don't want to see an epitaph that says, "Here lies planet Earth. Politicians couldn't agree how to pay to save it." Our children deserve better. Our grandchildren deserve more. We deserve. We know what we need to do. We just need to do it. It's an issue of political will, and being as bold and aggressive and urgent as we need to be. So, science is telling us what to do, and so is Mother Nature. So, we introduced a bill. We've had two bills going that over 2 years, the California Green New Deal, which really provided the framework for how to think about addressing climate change in the way that is necessary to be the leader that the world needed, certainly at that time with the Trump administration pulling out of the Paris agreements, but also the nation needs, and how to always keep equity top of mind, and thinking about our poorest communities, our most disadvantaged communities, most vulnerable communities who often face the biggest threats from climate change, who have suffered the most often from environmental injustice, who live at the intersection of contamination and pollution and poverty, and who have suffered mightily because of that. And so sometimes people say, your bill's so big, it tries to do so much, it's so expensive. Bills can do more than one thing at once. They can address climate change while promoting equity. And the bill isn't trying to be ambitious, it's just trying to solve a problem. Bills solve problems. And if the problem is unlimited in scope, then the bill needs to meet it and be able to address that challenge. So, and some things like saving our planet are worth the investment and worth the cost. So, our bill had a lot of different components to it. Increasing public transit, addressing homelessness, building more affordable housing, reducing greenhouse gases from mobile sources, and making sure there's access to clean water and clean air. It's sort of laid out the full comprehensive approach to how you think about a California Green New Deal, how you create jobs in the process, how you promote equity while you save our planet and address our climate crisis. And the issue of cost came up. We ran squarely into an international pandemic that no one expected, where we were facing major budget shortfalls, bills that were expensive, bills that were politically difficult, all fell by the wayside as we sort of singularly focused on COVID-19 response and recovery. And we continued to need to push, but we were sort of waylaid by an international pandemic and by COVID-19. But the principles continue. California really has been one of the vanguards of promoting equity while we address the climate crisis. I'm very thankful for folks like my colleagues, Assembly members Christina Garcia and Eduardo Garcia, who really pushed and promoted equity. And then we continue to have bold action like the governor's executive order on electric vehicles and other bills that are being introduced, including a climate resiliency bond that's being introduced this week, if it hasn't been already, that all sort of are animated by the principles of the California Green New Deal. There's also been an ongoing issue that needs to be addressed and has not been resolved yet around working people and labor and folks who have good jobs with prevailing wages and safe, fair working conditions, retirement security, and healthcare in the fossil fuel industry. And those folks certainly who understand climate change and want a world and a planet for their children also want to have a good job and don't want to be worse off in the clean energy economy. So making the case that there will be a just transition, that folks can move from the good jobs in the fossil fuel economy to good jobs in the clean energy economy is a case that we need to continue to have to make, because it's been a political challenge to addressing some of the key or to making progress in some of the key ways that we need to address climate change. So let me leave it at that and just say thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you. I've listened to the other panelists and appreciate the input, appreciate the discussion, and appreciate your passion and commitment to addressing our climate crisis. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Assemblymember Bonta. We will now take a few questions from all of you. Each question should be no more than 1 minute so we can get it to as many as possible. If you would like to ask a question, raise your hand, and you do this on Zoom by clicking on the participants link, go to the bottom and click on the raise hand icon bar. And if you're on the phone, press *9 and we will see your hand. And then CARA staff will call on you when it is your turn to ask a question. You can also put your question in the chat and we will try to have it answered there. Okay. I believe.
Thank you, T. D, we have about enough time for about 2 or 3 questions for raising the hands. And the first one up was, oh my gosh, I think that it was,
Yes, it was Susie. Susie.
All right, it looks like Susie Goldmacher.
Oh, it would be.
And you'll need to unmute, Susie.
Oh, I need to unmute. Sorry, I did.
Come on.
Here we go. Okay, so
Susie,
my first question has to do, and it's to Assemblyman Bonta.
I think we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to know, what about getting rid of fracking in California? And
Yes.
are there Democrats who don't agree with Assemblyman Bonta and his bill? And what can we do to help?
Thank you. There's a bill that I had been working on, and Senator Wiener is leading on with a large coalition of folks. Maybe you're part of that coalition to ban fracking. And so there is that effort underway in California at the moment. And the governor announced it as well. At the same time, he announced his electric vehicle
I didn't hear.
Targets. And I think there's a belief that needs some, that the fracking part needs some legislative action, thus the bill and the coalition. So
Okay.
I think you'll be happy with that effort that's in place now to ban fracking once and for all in California. And are there people that don't support the bill? There are. You know, people point to the cost. People point to the idea that it tries to do so much. They point to the challenge of labor, and labor, specifically some of the folks that work in the fossil fuel industry were opposed because they didn't necessarily they weren't persuaded by yet, I'll say yet because I'm hopeful and optimistic, by the plans for a just transition. And so I think it's important so that the just transition is real, including Assemblymember David Chu has a bill that I'm co-authoring on wind power, and showing that we can move towards a clean energy economy with wind power, and also that building trades folks can work in those jobs and have good jobs there that are, you know, akin to what they have now. So I think we sort of need to prove it and show it. You know, the old phrase that talk is cheap and actions, you know, really show what's possible. So we're in the process of showing it, and honestly, that was one of the major obstacles. People had concerns when our friends in labor who cared about their jobs, but also cared about the climate crisis, were not able to see a pathway forward. So we want to spend more time working on that pathway forward, and that's what we're really focusing on this year, overcoming that obstacle politically.
Thank you. We're going to move to the next question. Lynn Jacobson, unmute your line. You're still muted, Lynn.
I'll try again. I didn't get what the acronym ECA is and how we can contact the two groups that are working here in California.
So maybe Bob and Paul could put in the chat your organization's name and a website.
I asked the question in the chat also.
Well, I'm referring it to them now because they might not have seen.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so look in the chat, and that way we can take another question.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Art Persico?
Thank you. For Rob Bonta, what's the status of the Green New Deal legislation in California and at the federal level? And what can we do to help get them passed?
I'll answer that in two ways. One is the federal New Deal, and I think that the federal Green New Deal and the California Green New Deal, I think, really planted flags of values into the ground around the idea that our efforts need to be bold and urgent and aggressive, that they need to have the two pillars always, equity and addressing the climate crisis, not one without the other, that they are inextricably intertwined, and that we need to have a just transition, and that a bill can do more than one thing at once. Those are all sort of new proposals that really have captured the imagination of policymakers and activists and others who care about the future of our planet. So I'm not sure where the California Green or where the federal Green New Deal is right now. I don't know if it's been reintroduced. Not sure if President Biden is supportive. I think he's probably supportive of many components of it, but maybe not the bill as it stands. But obviously it is a rallying call, and is a driver of everything that we do to address climate change. The same is true of the California Green New Deal. I introduced it the last 2 years. We didn't get very far in the legislative process, to be perfectly honest. It didn't get out of the first committee in the first house. And a lot of that was because of concerns from labor, that the cost, the idea that the bill does many things at once. And so we want to, so this year I really wanted to focus on making the just transition, as I saw in the chat, more than a slogan, making it real, sort of a proof of concept, a demonstration that just transition isn't just a theory, a concept, an intellectual exercise. It's real and can provide real jobs that are equivalent or better than in the fossil fuel industry as we move as a society towards clean energy. So that's been the focus, to kind of overcome that hurdle. Part of that is showing, as I mentioned before, that wind power projects can be projects that protect our planet and support working people at the same time.
Thank you. That'll be the end of our questions. We're sorry, but we're running a little late. So I'm going to turn it back over to Dee.
Oh man, they're running as late as me.
Thank you. We're going to divert. Whoops, am I there? We're going to divert slightly from our agenda. We're going to go with a song break from Hali, and
It was
then
organized by a bunch of seniors, so it makes sense why they're late.
and then we turn to our agenda with come back with Hene Kelly.
Yeah.
Okay, somebody's not muted. I don't know who it is. Maybe the person who just came in. Anyway, here's the song by with new words by Bonnie Lockhart, and it's called "Growing Climate Movement." And you were going to share screen for the words, right?
We'll try and do that.
Okay,
but
well, I'm
just
going to
get
go ahead
started.
and start. There we go. There's the words. If you go down to Lake Merritt, bet you're gonna find some people who care. People need the power, got to seize the hour. New York City, Oakland, and everywhere. Big oil can't keep burning. We got the tide to turn. Growing climate movement. Please mute if you're not muted. Growing climate movement. We can make jobs in the city. We don't have to burn those fossil fuels. There is wealth aplenty, use it for the many. 1% won't keep on making rules. Big oil can't keep burning. We got the tide turning. Growing climate movement. Growing climate movement. We got imagination. We can build up new technology. With a common vision, make a just transition. Workplaces with real democracy. Big oil can't keep burning. We got the tide turning. Growing climate movement. Growing climate movement. Okay, and now we're going to do to the tune of Working on the Railroad. This is We Are Gonna Stop the Fracking. Let's hope so. We are gonna stop the fracking all the livelong day. We are gonna stop the fracking in California. Can't you see the climate changing? Dirty, all your time is done. Can't you see the clean solution? Water, wind, and sun. Water, wind, and sun. Water, wind, and sun. Water, wind, and sun. Your time has come. Water, wind, and sun. Water, wind, and sun. Dirty, all your time is done. Someone's in the back room with big oil. Someone's in the back room, we know. Someone's in the back room with big oil. Sacramento just say no, and we say fee, fi, fracking's gotta go. Fee, fi, fracking's gotta go. Fee, fi, fracking's gotta go. Sacramento just say no.
That was fabulous. As always, Hali, thank you.
Thank you.
And we will send all of the songs, if you didn't get them, and the recording from today to everybody. But no CARA meeting. Oh, by the way, Dee had to run to another meeting because we're going a little long, so I'm ending for him. And no CARA meeting would ever be the correct unless we end with a call to action, because in fact that is what we are about: educating, advocating, organizing, and acting. And there's no better person to tell us how we can get started as an organization to engage locally, statewide, and nationally on climate justice issues, but Hene Kelly, our CARA legislative director. So Hene, you are up.
Okie doke. I am really excited by what we all saw. I'm excited by the songs that some of us tried to sing. And I want to assure you that we will be working with Assemblymember Bonta on good legislation to save our climate and our planet. So one of the wonderful things is at the bottom of your agenda, you have all the information that we can give you to really get involved. So I want you after this to look at it and see what you would want to do. If you want to join our Climate Justice Task Force, you could sign up with Cynthia. We have her address right there, cynthial.cara@gmail.com, or you can call her up and say, I want to be on the Climate Justice Task Force, and we'd love to have you. You can also find resources on our CARA website, and we can find the AOC video on the Green New Deal. Our legislative team is really going to be working with Bonta. We're going to be working with Chu. We're going to be working with Werner. Our legislative committee meets once a month on the third Thursday of the month, and we go over legislation. We are going to be meeting with all of our Assembly and Senate people in May, and we will be talking about climate justice, and we want you all to be with us. So basically, I'm glad that you all could be here. And Jody, you want to wrap it up?
Thank you, Hene. So this is our beginning foray into working on this issue. Although many of you have been working locally, and our legislative committee has taken some action, but the time is now to ramp it up, and we need all of you. So please do what Hene said and get involved. We're really thankful to all of our speakers today who are able to join us. We know there's lots more questions, lots more discussion. We see this as just the beginning, but we hope that you all will engage with us as we start bringing this back to our local CARA action teams where the action happens. So please make sure that you bring your suggestions for local issues, and we'll bring you the state issues and national issues as we move forward. So I want to call this meeting to a close with one final reminder that this is the second of our fabulous Friday forums. The next one is going to be kind of different. We're going to the theater on March 5th. To see a performance by Josh Kornbluth called Citizen Brain, which is kind of a monologue about the importance of a healthy brain as we age, and some of the newest information that the UC San Francisco Global Health Institute, Global Brain Institute has been working on around things you can do to keep your brain healthy as we age. But this will be done in more of a funny, performance mode. So please put March 5th on your calendar. That's our next fabulous forum, and it'll be on brain health. And so we hope you'll all join us and bring your friends and family. And we want to thank you all for being here today and taking this very first step with us as CARA moves into action around climate justice and issues in California, in our local communities, and the world. So thank you all for being here.